Psalm 1. And I'd like to compare this psalm with, first of all, the life of Christ. Like, we often look at Psalm 2 as a messianic prophecy of Christ, but Psalm 1, I think, could be as well. And actually, there are some early church writers that kind of allude to that this is a description of Christ. And I think it certainly can be. And it can then also show us how to be like Christ. So as we read this psalm this morning, I want you to think about Jesus, first of all, and then secondly, think about how we can imitate this. I'm going to read out of the KJV here this morning. Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful. I was going to ask how many people actually memorized this psalm. Anybody ever memorize this psalm? Probably most of us did in school or sometime. How many could still quote it? Anyway, it is a psalm that's very familiar to us because it's a very foundational, and it's kind of almost like in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus begins with the Beatitudes, the blesseds. And here David begins with this blessedness as well. And I think there's some parallels to this in the Beatitudes in the Sermon on the Mount. So think of Jesus now. He was a man that did not walk in the counsel of the ungodly. He didn't stand in the way of sinners, even though he ate with sinners. He was accused of eating and dining with sinners, being a friend of sinners. But this is something different. He didn't sit in the seat of the scornful. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law doth he meditate day and night. Did Christ as a boy, as a young man, delight in the law of the Lord and meditate in that? What evidence do we have of that? Anything come to your mind?
In the temple at 12?
Yeah, in the temple at 12. Right, he's there disputing with like the lawyers and the Pharisees, the top people that know the law, the Torah. He's in there disputing with them and actually coming up with things that they had probably never thought of before. And he was right. And that only comes from a direct connection with God and meditating. I don't think he was just born with it. I think it's actually something that he diligently disciplined himself to do. All right, so verse 3, and he shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water, that bringeth forth his fruit in his season. His leaf also shall not wither, and whatsoever he doeth shall prosper. Does that describe Christ? What did the people think about his teachings? It says that they were amazed at his gracious words, right? So like there was something desirable. They followed after him. Crowds and multitudes followed after him because he was like this tree with something that offered them something that no other tree did. I think it's in Song of Solomon that's where, and this in Song of Solomon I've said before can be read in 3 different ways, but one of the ways is that the bride and the groom there, he's saying that his or her companion is like a fruit tree, like an apple tree in the woods. Well, if you're walking through the woods, right, you don't expect to pick peaches and apples, right? You're just walking through the woods. And what if you're walking through the woods and all of a sudden you find an apple tree, right? You would probably pick an apple and eat it. It would be something that nourishes you and tastes good. That's how Christ was when he came to the earth. He was just like this apple tree in the woods, and people were thirsty, people were hungry, and people were looking for something and he was that for them. And that's a beautiful picture of Christ. It says, whatsoever he doeth shall prosper. Can you think of anybody else in the Bible that it says that whatever he did prospered?
Samuel.
Okay. Oh, maybe. I don't know.
I think so.
Okay. Samuel? All right. I was actually thinking of somebody else. I think it's said of Joseph as well, that God made everything in his hand to prosper. When he worked for Potiphar, when he was, everything, even in prison, like God made everything he did to prosper. All right. So as I was thinking about this, I thought about that. I think I can honestly say I believe in a prosperity gospel. Now, before you get all up in arms, I said a prosperity gospel, not the prosperity gospel that preachers are preaching today. And I'll try to talk about that a little bit shortly. Okay, so even though, like, this kind of prosperity isn't like big fat bank accounts, no, not at all. Jesus didn't have that. He didn't even have a pillow, he said, to lay his head on. But he was a prosperous man, the most prosperous man that ever lived on this earth. The ungodly are not so, but are like the chaff, which the wind driveth away. Think about all the persecutors of Jesus, people who mocked him, people who laughed at him. We read about the crucifixion. Right, they were like chaff, and people were tired of chaff. They were tired of this wishy-washy religion, and they wanted substance. The ungodly shall not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. We read about Pilate there, and Pilate, he was the judge. He was making judgments. But his judgment didn't stand. His judgment fell flat because there was a greater judge over him. The Lord knoweth the way of the righteous, but the way of the ungodly shall perish. So this last verse kind of summarizes it and says, basically there's two ways here. There's the way of the righteous, and then there's the way of the ungodly. So there's two paths, two things, two choices, two destinations. And in life, they're not always so obvious. It might seem like there's all kinds of paths, right? There's so many different ways of living, so many different religions. But they all come within two categories, the way of the righteous or the way of the ungodly. And let's look a little bit more now, applying this to our lives. It says, walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly. So counsel is something that it's probably, I think these are kind of progressive. We have counsel of the ungodly, we have the way of sinners, and the seat of the scornful. I kind of see these as three things that are kind of one worse than the other. First, we have the counsel of the ungodly. You could have people that give pretty good counsel. I've read books like that about marriage, books like that about making money, business. There's a lot of philosophy out there that's actually pretty good. Except they miss one thing, they miss God, and they miss some principles that Christ taught about the upside down kingdom, like we heard. And so while there's a lot of good things to learn, they're missing something. So I would say this first category is maybe more the missing something category. And there's a lot of good preaching we can listen to, preachers all over the internet that might have seemingly good messages, but what's often wrong with them is what they're missing. And it's not always too obvious at first glance. But the counsel here to us is to not walk in their counsel, to not receive our counsel, our advice from them. And so that requires a little bit of discernment sometimes. And I'm not here to say where that line is between the godly and the ungodly. I think it does require us to make some judgments, and sometimes our judgments may be wrong. And I guess I don't apologize for that. But if we think about to try to be careful about who we receive our counsel from and say, you know, this person, I've read enough of his stuff, I've heard enough of his stuff, that I don't think it's somebody I want to get counsel from. And we just stop listening to him or reading his books. And then there's other people, we say, yes, he's got something, he's teaching something, maybe he doesn't have everything either, but he may have more of the counsels of God. You can tell he's trying, he's seeking desperately to follow the Lord, and we can receive counsel from men. And even there, men are imperfect. I mean, any book you read, any sermon you listen to, you're listening to a man, right? A man. Okay, so the second stage here is standing in the way of sinners. This word standing now is a little different. The word walketh is a word about movement. It's actually a word that's used in the Old Testament about the wind, the movement of the wind, the movement of water, and there was another one, I forget what it is, but it has to do with movement. But standing in the way of sinners is more about like taking a certain position. So now we've maybe went a step further. We've listened to the counsel of the ungodly, even though maybe there's a lot of good things, but we've kind of become accustomed to their teachings and their way of doing things, and we begin to gradually become like the people we listen to. it happens to us without trying. I think it's Jesus said that we will become like our teacher, right? So then we begin to like stand in the way of sinners. Like this is the next stage. Sinners are people who there's not just something missing here, but they're actually doing things that are against the will of God. And we find ourselves soon in that camp and have to take a stand against that. And then the third stage is sitting in the seat of the scornful. And the word sitteth here in the Hebrew actually means to dwell. So now we're not just moving in a certain direction of counsel, neither are we just kind of like stopping and standing in the place of sinners, like being part of them. We're actually dwelling there in the seat of the scornful. And the word scornful has, I think, a lot to do with pride. Like it's a third level of disobedience where people are just arrogant and proud and not. I've seen people who disobey God and know it. They feel bad about it. But there's another category of people who live in disobedience and don't care. And that's a terrible place to be. But these things are progressive and they happen in stages. And, we see people, I know people in my past who I grew up with who followed the Lord. And when I look at where they are today, I wonder how they got there, because they would have never went from where they are now to there. They would have never done that. It happens progressively. It happens in very small increments. And this past week, as I was working on a job where I was doing some crown molding in the kitchen, and whenever you work with wood, whether it's moldings, hardwood floors, whatever it is, they have to do something. You have to do something with the wood before you install it. It's called acclimating the wood. Anybody hear that word before? So if you're a woodworker, you understand that you have to acclimate the wood. So if you're doing hardwood floor in a house, you actually have to take the wood and put it in the house and leave it there for about 3 days before you install it. Now, why would you do that? Anybody have any idea? It's because the wood has to take on its environment. Like the moisture is different in the air, the temperature is different, and so the wood actually moves. Like we think wood is just hard and doesn't move. No, wood actually moves. It expands and contracts. And so you have to put the wood into the room, and I've actually heard of people who do like big beams in buildings. They have to leave them in there up to 9 months sometimes if they really want it to like stay an exact size where they cut it, because once you cut it, that's where it's going to be, and it's going to move with the house. All right, so what happens if you don't acclimate the wood? Well, I'll just bring a piece of this molding that I was working with yesterday. Like right now, this has a really nice tight joint. And so if this wood would be like really cold or really moist, and I would take it into a house that's really dry, and I would install this and make all nice joints everywhere, what would happen is this wood is going to move, and it's actually going to start cracking. You wouldn't believe it, but it actually will. It will crack apart. Now, this is glued so hard I can't even take it apart. But wood will do that. Wood is actually stronger than I am. I can't crack this, but this wood could crack itself. It could crack this joint because the cabinets or whatever, it could expand. And the same thing happens with floors. I was working in a house where they did brand new hardwood floors, white oak, and white oak is like super expensive, like $20 a square foot. And so they did all these floors. A couple months later, there were cracks all over the floor. It was like $1 million house, probably a multi-million-dollar house. What happened? It wasn't acclimated, I don't think, and they didn't finish it right away or something. But anyway, basically what I'm trying to demonstrate here is that, oh, there we go. Eventually, the wood moves enough that there's like big open joints and cracks, or it tightens itself so hard that it can split apart at other places. So acclimation is something that happens super, super slow. Like I said, 3 days. You need to leave a hardwood floor in a house for it to like reach its acclimation, and you will not physically be able to see the difference. It's something that it happens in such small increments. So that's the importance of making right choices here. We have the 2 ways described here in Psalms, and we have incremental differences in what happens when we start to follow the wrong way. And I think it's also the same the other way. If we're like a tree planted by the rivers of water, what is it about that tree that makes it flourish? Well, it's the roots, right? How many of you see the roots of these trees out here? You can't see them, right? Did you know there's almost as much tree under the ground as above the ground for some trees? Maybe not all trees, but some trees have almost as much mass under the ground as above the ground of roots that are going all over the place. And what they're doing is anchoring the tree, and it's receiving moisture. And so I'd like to think about that as this meditating in the law here, as he says here, meditating in the Word of God, as something that, like a prosperous person, you don't really see what makes him prosperous. Like Jesus, for example, the disciples are going out and they meet this man that has a devil. How was that story? The man that had the devil. They tried casting him out and they couldn't cast him out. And they come to Jesus and say, like, Lord, why couldn't we cast out this devil? And Jesus just right there on the spot did it. And they said, how is this possible? And Jesus said, this kind doesn't come out except by prayer and fasting. But Jesus didn't stop and pray and fast. But did Jesus have that connection? Did he have those roots? Did he have that source that he was connected to on a daily basis? I think he did. I think that's what this tree is a picture of. So it says here, let's see. Verse 3, his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law doth he meditate day and night. This is a choice we have to make as well. It's a choice to think about, study, and think about, and not just think about, but think about how to apply it to our lives. Meditating is more than just thinking about it. It's about going through life and like observing the things as you go, as forks in the road or as a crossroad where we make choices. We make choices and we say, Lord, now how should I do this? How should I walk with you here? How can I best follow you here? And it's something that does require effort. It's easy to go through life. It's easy to go through the day without praying. We do our prayers in the morning. We read our Bibles in the morning. And then we kind of forget about it. But this is an encouragement to meditate on that this is what true prosperity, this is how to be truly prosperous. This is how to truly make right decisions in our lives on a daily basis. Because there's a lot of things that come up in a day where we don't have time to pull out our Bibles or maybe even have time to fast and pray like Jesus did, like the men who couldn't cast out the devil. So we need that connection with the Lord on a daily basis. I've met with different people in the time that I was a minister, even back at Pioneer Valley, where we would meet with people as they were like applying for church membership. And often when we got to the question about what's your prayer life like and your Bible reading, almost every time, people would say, well, it can grow. It's maybe not quite what it should be. And I think it's just the tendency for us to be there. And so my encouragement is let's not be satisfied with that. Let's press into more. I think if I would ask you all now, could your prayer life be better? I expect most of our hands would go up. Mine certainly would. So my challenge is let's press into that. Let's press into the waters. Let's press into the law of God and meditate on that more to be this prosperous Christian. All right, so I think sometimes we give up too soon. Recently I saw a picture, I just saw it, not even connected to this, but I thought about it. There was a picture of a man, he was pumping water. How many remember those old hand pumps where you would have to pump for a long time and finally the water would come out of the top? Anybody ever use one of those? No? But in the Amish relatives we had, they had these hand pumps, and you'd have to go out and pump water. And so there was a big metal handle, and you would pump up and down. Nobody used any of those? Okay. All right, so you pump up and down, and after a while, finally, water comes up. But there was this picture that I saw. The man, he was sweating, he was tired and thirsty, and he was there pumping water, and the water was like this close to the top, and he gave up because he didn't try quite long enough. He just thought there was no water there. And sometimes I think it's a little that way in our prayer life and in our reading of the Scripture. Maybe we just don't pursue long enough in prayer or pursue long enough to really find the water of life. So now I would like to just go to Galatians 5 yet and see some parallels there. So we looked at these two ways in Psalms, and I'd like to show you in Galatians 5 what true prosperity actually is. It's not buying a like these prosperity preachers, they like to buy their private jets and all that kind of stuff and own these mansions on a hilltop. I don't think that's what this prosperity is all about. If we dig into the Word and we meditate on the Word day and night, then God is going to give us something that we didn't have before. And what do you think that might be? Well, what is Galatians 5 about? The fruits of the Spirit. Right, so when we plant ourselves there, God does something miraculous. He gives us His Holy Spirit. And then the Holy Spirit will make us that tree that actually produces fruit. We're going to be different from the rest of the trees in the woods. We're going to have something of substance. And the fruit isn't even for ourselves. How many trees eat their own fruit? They don't. The fruit is there for somebody else to come along and bless them. Right? So think about these fruits as ways that we can bless other people, not just ourselves. So in Galatians 5, I'm going to actually first read the works of the flesh, because they would demonstrate the other side, the other way. And as we read through this list, I'm going to ask some of you to tell me what your Bibles say, because the KJV uses some words here that are not as familiar to us. Let's start in verse 19, where it lists the works of the flesh. So these would be people who follow the counsel of the ungodly, who stand in the way of sinners and sit in the seat of the scornful. They're in one of those places, and the devil uses these things as a wedge to get into our hearts. And so he plants things in there, and I'd say probably like the three biggest struggles that men and maybe women to face: lust, anger, and pride. And I would say that's probably pretty universal. Like every man and maybe every woman deals with those things at some point in their lives. And there's a whole list of things here, and if those things aren't something you have ever struggled with, there's surely something here. And to remember that these are things the devil is trying to bring into our lives, and he doesn't bring them in as a big package. He tries to come in like a wedge. And I don't have a wedge, but you've probably heard the expression, the thin edge of the wedge. The thin edge of the wedge is so thin, it's like there's almost nothing to it, right? But as you pound that wedge into a tree, you can make a tree, a big tall tree, lean. It might be leaning this way, and when you cut a slit at the bottom and start pounding a wedge in, as the wedge gets thicker, some of those wedges are maybe 1.5 inches, 2 inches thick. An inch of wedge can move the top of that tree feet. It can actually tilt the tree the opposite direction to get it to fall right. And so that's what the thin edge of the wedge does. When we allow any of these fleshly things, when we allow them in our hearts and we don't overcome them, when we take the counsel, we sit and we dwell there, we allow that in, and that's where that acclimation begins to happen. The thin edge of the wedge doesn't stay thin. It becomes thicker all the time, and it actually changes our course of direction just like that tree. All right, so let's start in verse 19. It says, the works of the flesh are manifest, which are these: adultery. It's probably the same word in all of these, in all versions, right? Fornication. If it's different, raise your hand, all right? Uncleanness. There's a different one there, right? Lisa, what does that one say? Impurity. Okay, pretty much the same. Lasciviousness. That's not a word we use all the time. Yeah. Lewdness. Okay, any other words? All right, I think it has to do with like lust and sensuality. All right, then verse 20, idolatry. You have any different words there? Okay, witchcraft. Sorcery. All right. Hatred. Yeah.
Enmity.
What was it?
Enmity.
Enmity. All right. Variance. Yep.
Strife.
Okay. Strife. Emulations.
Sorry, I think the last one was contention.
Okay. They may not always be in the same order. I don't know if they're.
Jealousy is for the one you just said.
What was that?
Jealousy.
Jealousy. Okay. Jealousy. Wrath.
Fits
Yep.
of anger.
Fits of anger. Okay. Strife.
Self-respect.
All right.
Selfish ambitions.
Okay.
Rivalries.
All right. Seditions.
Dissension.
Dissension.
Dissensions. Right. And heresies.
Divisions.
Division. All right. All right. So this is a long list. You could look at each of these words individually, but they're all things that the devil tries to bring in. Oh, we're not done yet. Verse 21. I'll just read these. Envyings, murderers, drunkenness, revelings, and such like. And that's kind of tagged on there, but I don't know if it's just tagged on there because I don't know if we can put every single temptation into a category. There's things that are just of such like that have no, maybe don't really have a category, but they're of the devil. Intuitively, we know they're just of the devil. They're of the world. They're not of Christ. Of which I tell you before, as I have also told you in time past, that they which do such things shall not inherit the kingdom of God. All right, so that's the destination of someone who is not walking circumspectly. He's not being careful as he goes through life. He's not making right choices. He ultimately ends up not in the kingdom of God. Then we have the other side, this tree that's planted by the rivers of water. What's the fruit? What's the prosperity that's going to come from his life? Let's think about what a prosperous person could look like. The fruit of the Spirit is love. Oh, everyone believes in love, right? I mean, everyone believes in love. But there's something different about godly love and charity, and that is that it's sacrificial. And as I see a couple, recently worked for a couple, they were married for years. They were both in their 80s. They were happy together. They were holding hands. Like they were like joyful. Like there was something different. Like you hardly ever see that. What is it that those couples possess that so many don't? Where they get married, don't last, get married again, doesn't last. I think they possess sacrificial love. They have learned sacrificial love. That love is more than just a feeling. That love is a commitment, and love requires 100% commitment. And that's not a drudgery. It's something that actually is a blessing. Blessed is the man, right? We read there, and so this is something that becomes a blessing. Choose to love sacrificially, and you can be a blessing. You'll be prosperous. Joy. Joy is something I think, too, that we have to choose. Because we don't live in a perfect world. We don't live in a fair world. We wish things would go our way. We wish we could have all the things that everybody else has and enjoy all the pleasure and the fun. But joy is something that God gives us. It's a deep joy within us that comes from sacrificing. So actually, the Bible says it's more blessed to give than to receive. And children, when you receive a present, it does bring you joy, right? But did you ever give a present to someone and feel really good about that? You sit down and make a card for someone and give it to them, you feel really good about that, right? Joy is something that comes as we give to others, as we contribute to each other. And then peace. I think, again, peace is a fruit that is so missing today in the world. People are fighting to get peace, but how can you fight for peace? True peace comes by this upside-down principle that Joel was talking about, and peace will beget peace. When we live peaceable lives and we try to be peaceable in the world, peaceable with each other, the fruit of that is peace. Okay, and then long-suffering. There may be some different words in different versions for this, but I actually like the KJV word for this one. It does have to do with patience, but long-suffering. Here's a fruit that's kind of unique. Like a lot of fruit tastes really good, but this one actually has some suffering involved. How many like to suffer? Nobody does. Nobody likes to suffer, right? But this one has maybe some bitterness to it at first. But when we suffer long with each other, there is actually something good that can come forth from that. This is not talking about suffering long and forbearing, I don't think, with sin. This is talking about, I think, personal grievances and personalities, right? So some people, they just rub us the wrong way, and so we don't know how to deal with that, and we get upset with them or we gossip about them. But no, long suffering gives people the benefit of the doubt, realizing that, I've got personality issues, I've got things that are way less than imperfect. So we have to learn how to deal with our pet peeves. You boys have pet rabbits and pet cats or whatever, but pet peeves is something we shouldn't have. How many have pet peeves? So those are just things that just kind of annoy you, right? The things that maybe somebody talks too much, maybe somebody doesn't talk enough, maybe somebody sings too loud, maybe somebody doesn't sing loud enough, right? Some people sing off tune, some people don't keep the time, right? There's pet peeves, things that can just annoy us. But here's the call to be long-suffering. And I actually think that while I said suffering is something that's painful, I actually think that we can actually learn to do this and not be pained by it. All right, the next word is gentleness. There may be some other words for this one. Kindness. Okay. Right, it's just something that's missing today in society as well, just kindness. Children, be kind to older people. Be kind at the store. Open the door for people when they're coming behind you. Be kind to your brothers and sisters, even though they're just ordinary people, right? Learn to be kind and gentle. Fathers, be gentle to your children. Mothers, be gentle. Mothers possess that more than fathers, probably. Goodness. Any other words for that one? It probably just means what it says, right? It just I actually didn't look up what the Greek word is here, but it is one of the fruits of the Spirit, goodness, and then faith. Meekness. Meekness I would like to talk about here a little bit. Sometimes we talk about the word Gelassenheit. Have you ever heard that word? And we talk about having a hard time just finding a word that means the same thing as that. I actually think this word meekness is maybe one of the closest words. Because listen to the definition for meekness. This is from the Oxford Dictionary. It says it's to be quiet and gentle, easily imposed on, submissive, and some of the synonyms are yielding, unresisting, obedient, compliant, and tame. And this is, again, quite unnatural for most of us to be this, but it is a work of the Holy Spirit in our lives, and it's something we need to press into as well. Jesus said, "Take my yoke upon me and learn of me, for I am meek." Jesus was a model of this. And while it seemed like he was just being run over like a doormat, he wasn't. That's not what meekness is. Meekness allows people to run over them, but it is actually there's a strength in this because we are overcoming. We're actually being overcomers. There's a verse where he says, "Don't be overcome of evil, but overcome evil with good." And so by doing good, by blessing those who persecute us without fighting back, by being that doormat and just blessing others despite how they use us, I think is what this is talking about. Moses is said to be the meekest man on earth, or at least at that point. I don't know if anybody has superseded him since that time. And then we have temperance. This is actually the opposite of one of the words in the works of the flesh. One of the words there was revelings. I think it was in, I'm not sure what version that was in anymore. But revelings means just like excess. Like we might have excess of eating. That can be reveling. We might have excess of drinking, excess of pleasure, excess of sleep, excess of work. Right? But temperance here is something that puts these things into perspective. Now, the interesting thing about all these fruits, it says, "Against such there is no law." Be curious to know what you think that means. I'll tell you, maybe I should tell you what I think it means, but I would be interested in hearing your thoughts. I think it means that, like with a lot of things, there's kind of laws that govern it. You can only maybe go so far, and then you kind of went too far. But with the fruits of the Spirit, there is like no law that says now it's enough. There's never enough of love. There's never enough of joy. There's never enough of any of these things. You can never have too much of any. There's no limit to these. There's no law that says, okay, well, here's the stopping line. Peter thought he was really forgiving a lot of times when I think he thought he was being quite generous when he said forgive 7 times, but Jesus said no, it's 70 times 7. Like this, and I don't think he was saying that even that's the limit. Against such there is no law. There's no limit to those things. If we can live by these principles, David says and Jesus says that we will prosper. And we're going to be like that tree. And I believe as a church we can be like that tree. As an individual we can be like that tree. And as we meet people in the world, and we do this to each other as well. We bless each other with fruit. We bless our neighbors, the people around us. They'll say, yeah, this is like an apple tree. And all the rest of these trees, all they have is hard acorns. Like there's something different about, and we don't do it to bring glory to ourselves. I don't know what the balance is between not doing our works to be seen of men, like Jesus said, versus let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. But I think maybe that's the key. Who's getting the glory? God or us? It must always be God. So as we think about those two paths, as we think about like the subtle differences that wedge can make in the direction of the tree, as we think about the wood and how it can so easily adapt to its environment, let's be careful where we get where we receive our influence. And again, I would just like to encourage us all to make a commitment to spend time in the Word and spend time with the Lord. Because there's enough of negative things in life that we could just dwell on that the whole day. There's enough of negative stuff happening in the government, in the world, and relationships, you name it. There's enough of negative stuff we could just discuss it all day and not get done. But David, when he came back from Ziklag and he saw that the city was burned and his wives were gone and the children were gone, what did David do? He encouraged himself in the Lord. So be encouraged. There is courage for all of us, no matter what circumstances in life. You know how the devil gets people down. Why is it that so many times you hear of influential men, like leaders, church leaders, who fall into sin? I think it's because they've lost courage. They've become discouraged. They've allowed circumstances to make them discouraged. And so the thin edge of the wedge gets in there and they begin to be tempted by things and receive their comfort somewhere other than God. Let's be encouraged in the Lord.